There are moments in life when it feels like everything has stopped moving forward. You pray, but nothing changes. You wait, but the silence only grows longer. You try to stay hopeful, but disappointment keeps arriving in ways your heart no longer knows how to carry. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to wonder if this is how your story ends. Not with one dramatic collapse, not with one sudden tragedy, but with exhaustion. Quiet exhaustion. The kind that settles into your soul after too many unanswered prayers, too many sleepless nights, too many moments where you kept pretending to be strong while secretly feeling like you were falling apart inside. At first, you tell yourself it is only a difficult season. You remind yourself that life changes, that pain never lasts forever, that God is still working even when you cannot see it. And for a while, those words help you keep going. You wake up each morning trying to believe that today might finally feel different. Maybe today the pressure will lift. Maybe today the waiting will end. Maybe today God will open the door you have been praying for. But then another day passes. And another. And another. And slowly, hope begins to feel heavier than fear. Because hoping while hurting is exhausting. Especially when nobody else fully understands what you are carrying. People see your face, but they do not see the war happening inside your mind. They hear your voice, but they do not hear the fear that keeps whispering to you late at night. They see you continuing your life, handling responsibilities, smiling when you need to smile, but they do not see how close you are to emotional collapse some nights when the silence becomes too loud. And the silence, that is what hurts the most. Not always the pain itself. Not even the waiting. But the silence. Because silence makes you question everything. God, where are you? Why does nothing seem to change? Have you forgotten me? You never planned to ask those questions. You never imagined your faith would become this fragile. There was a time when trusting God felt natural. There was a time when peace came easier. But now life feels uncertain in ways that shake you deeply. The future looks unclear. The battles feel endless. And every time you think things might finally improve, something else seems to go wrong. So you become tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. The kind of tiredness that follows you into every quiet room. The kind that sits in your chest before the day even begins. The kind that makes even simple things feel emotionally heavy. And after carrying that weight for long enough, something dangerous begins to happen. You start believing this pain might never end. You stop expecting breakthrough. You stop expecting joy. You stop imagining victory because disappointment has trained your heart to prepare for more loss instead. And without realizing it, fear slowly becomes louder than faith. Fear tells you the story is over. Fear tells you nothing will ever change. Fear tells you this season is permanent. And if you listen to that voice long enough, you begin living like someone who has already lost hope, even while part of your heart is still desperately trying to hold on. There are nights where you lie awake replaying every mistake, every failure, every unanswered prayer, wondering if somehow you caused all of this. You question your choices. You question your strength. Sometimes, you even question whether God is truly still with you in this season at all. And that thought terrifies you. Because losing support from people hurts, but feeling distant from God hurts in a completely different way. So you pray again. Quietly. Exhaustedly. Not with perfect words anymore. Not with confident faith anymore. Just honestly. God. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. And maybe that is exactly the moment where everything begins changing. Not because your situation immediately improves. Not because every problem suddenly disappears. But because there comes a moment in every difficult season where God allows a person to reach the end of their own strength, so they can finally discover His. Right now, you may feel surrounded by pressure, confusion, fear, uncertainty, and silence. You may feel like your life is stuck in the middle of a story that no longer makes sense. But what if this is not the ending at all? What if this painful season is not proof that God abandoned you, but proof that He is preparing something deeper than you can currently see? Because sometimes the middle of the story feels so painful that it convinces you the victory will never come. But God sees the entire story. And what feels like the end to you, may only be the beginning of the breakthrough He has been preparing all along. And after that moment, things did not suddenly become easier. In fact, the heaviness seemed to grow stronger because now he could no longer pretend he was unaffected by everything happening around him. The exhaustion he had been hiding for so long finally began reaching every part of his life. He still woke up every morning. Still answered people when they spoke to him. Still tried to carry himself like someone who had everything under control. But inside, something was slowly collapsing. At first, it happened quietly. He stopped looking forward to things the way he used to. Small moments that once brought peace no longer reached him the same way. Conversations felt draining. Silence felt dangerous. Even rest no longer felt restful because his mind never truly stopped moving. Fear had become constant background noise inside him, following him into every room, every thought, every sleepless night. And the longer this season lasted, the more alone he began to feel. Not physically alone. Emotionally alone. The kind of loneliness that comes when nobody fully understands what you are carrying inside. People still saw him functioning. They still saw him moving through life. But they did not see the pressure sitting on his chest every morning before the day even began. They did not hear the thoughts repeating themselves late at night when fear became louder than peace. What if things never change? What if this really is the end of everything I hoped for? What if God has gone silent toward me? Again. And again. And again. The thoughts never fully left. They became part of the atmosphere inside his mind. Quietly shaping the way he saw everything around him. Every delay began feeling personal. Every closed door felt like proof that he was failing. Every unanswered prayer planted another seed of doubt inside his heart. At first, he tried fighting harder. He prayed more. Worked harder. Forced himself to stay hopeful even when his soul already felt exhausted. He kept telling himself that breakthrough would come soon if he just stayed faithful long enough. But over time, hope itself became difficult to carry. Because waiting becomes painful when silence lasts too long. And eventually, he began changing in ways he barely recognized. He became quieter. More withdrawn. More emotionally distant. Not because he wanted to push people away, but because he no longer had energy to explain what was happening inside him. How do you explain a pain that has no visible wound? How do you explain the exhaustion of trying to trust God while secretly wondering why everything still hurts so much? So instead, he carried it alone. And loneliness has a way of making suffering feel heavier. There were nights he sat in complete darkness long after everyone else had gone to sleep, staring into silence while his thoughts slowly pulled him deeper into fear. He replayed old memories, old prayers, old disappointments, trying desperately to understand where things had gone wrong. Sometimes he blamed himself. Sometimes he questioned his choices. Sometimes he questioned whether he had misunderstood God completely. Because if God was truly leading him, why did everything feel so unstable? Why did every season of hope seem followed by another season of pain? Why did it feel like he kept losing strength while trying so hard to keep believing? Those questions haunted him. Not loudly. Quietly. Relentlessly. And slowly, his faith began feeling fragile. Not dead. Not gone. But tired. Very tired. Prayer no longer felt easy. There were moments where he wanted to pray but could not even find words anymore. The emotional weight inside him had become too heavy for perfect prayers. Sometimes all he could do was sit there silently, hoping God somehow understood the things he no longer knew how to say out loud. And in those moments, silence became terrifying. Because silence leaves room for fear to speak. Fear told him he was abandoned. Fear told him he was forgotten. Fear told him this painful season would never end. And after hearing those thoughts long enough, part of him started believing them. Not completely, but enough to wound him deeply. He stopped imagining victory. Stopped expecting breakthrough. Stopped believing life could truly become beautiful again. Instead, survival became his only goal. One more day. One more night. One more prayer. That was all he could manage emotionally. And survival is exhausting when it lasts too long. There were moments where he genuinely wondered how much more his heart could carry before something inside him finally broke completely. He felt emotionally numb some days, overwhelmed on others. Sometimes he would sit alone for long periods without even realizing how much time had passed because his thoughts had become so heavy that even moving felt difficult. And the worst part was that he missed who he used to be. He missed the version of himself that trusted naturally. The version that believed God was near even during hard seasons. The version that woke up with peace instead of fear already sitting on his chest. That person felt distant now. Almost unreachable. And realizing that hurt deeply. Because suffering does not only attack your circumstances. It attacks your identity. It slowly convinces you that you are weaker than you truly are. That you are forgotten. That your story is ending in defeat. And after enough pain, those lies begin sounding believable. But even then, even at his weakest, even while fear and exhaustion consumed so much of his heart, something remained alive deep inside him. Small. Fragile. Almost hidden beneath all the pain. But still alive. A quiet part of him that refused to completely let go of God. A small voice inside him that still whispered. Hold on. He did not understand why that voice remained. He could not explain it. But no matter how exhausted he became, no matter how hopeless life sometimes felt, he could never fully stop reaching toward God. And maybe that was because God had never stopped reaching toward him first. Because sometimes, the middle of the story feels so painful that it convinces you the ending will never come. But what feels like destruction to the human heart, is often the exact place where God quietly begins preparing victory. And that was when the suffering became deeper than he had ever imagined possible. Not because one terrible event suddenly destroyed everything, but because the weight he had been carrying for so long finally settled fully into his soul. It followed him everywhere now. Into every morning. Every conversation. Every silent night. It sat inside his chest before the day even began, like a heaviness waiting for him the moment he opened his eyes. At first, he tried ignoring it. He convinced himself he only needed more rest, more discipline, more faith, more patience. But this was no longer simple exhaustion. Sleep did not remove it. Silence did not calm it. Even moments that should have brought peace now felt emotionally distant, like his heart no longer knew how to fully rest anymore. And slowly, he began losing connection with himself. That frightened him. Because there was a time when he knew exactly who he was. A time when hope came naturally, when faith felt steady, when peace lived inside him without effort. But now he barely recognized the person staring back at him. The confidence he once carried had faded. The emotional strength he depended on had weakened. Even joy itself felt unfamiliar. Not gone completely. Just far away. Almost unreachable. Days started blending together in ways that made time feel meaningless. Morning became night before he even noticed, and somewhere in between he carried the same fear, the same pressure, the same exhaustion from trying to survive emotionally while secretly feeling like he was collapsing inside. He still moved through life. Still answered people. Still tried to appear normal. But internally, he was fighting battles nobody else could see. And those invisible battles became unbearable at night. That was when everything grew louder. The silence. The fear. The thoughts. Especially the thoughts. What if this never changes? What if God has forgotten you? What if this pain is all your future will ever become? Again. And again. And again. The repetition slowly wore him down. Not because the thoughts were dramatic, but because they never fully stopped. They followed him everywhere, whispering fear into every quiet moment until fear itself became familiar. And when fear becomes familiar, suffering changes shape. It no longer feels temporary. It begins feeling permanent. That was what terrified him most. The possibility that this heaviness would never leave. There were nights he lay awake staring into darkness for hours, exhausted but unable to rest because his mind would not let him. He replayed every failure. Every disappointment. Every unanswered prayer. He questioned every decision he had made. Sometimes he wondered if somehow he caused all of this himself. Other times he wondered if God was trying to teach him something through suffering. But eventually, even those questions became tiring. Because after enough pain, a person stops searching for explanations. They just want relief. And relief never seemed to come. That was the part nobody understood. People saw him functioning. But they did not see the emotional weight crushing him internally. They did not see how much effort it took just to smile normally. They did not see how exhausted he felt pretending he still had strength left. And they certainly did not see the moments where he sat completely alone whispering desperate prayers into silence because he no longer knew what else to do. God, please, sometimes that was all he could say. Just those two words. Because his heart had become too tired for anything more. And still, heaven often seemed silent. That silence wounded him deeply. Not because he stopped believing in God completely, but because suffering changes how silence feels. At first silence feels temporary. Then confusing. Then painful. And eventually, after enough waiting, silence begins feeling personal. That was where he found himself now. Emotionally exhausted. Spiritually tired. Afraid that maybe his story was ending in disappointment after all. And slowly, he started withdrawing from life emotionally. Not dramatically. Quietly. He stopped expecting good things. Stopped imagining victory. Stopped believing breakthrough could actually happen for someone like him anymore. Hope itself had become heavy because hoping meant risking disappointment again. So instead, he learned how to survive without expecting much. One more day. One more night. One more prayer. That became his entire world. And survival is exhausting when it lasts too long. There were moments he genuinely wondered how much more his heart could carry before something inside him finally broke beyond repair. He felt emotionally fragile all the time now. Small problems overwhelmed him. Quiet moments frightened him. Even peaceful days felt temporary because deep down he expected another wave of pain to arrive eventually. That is what prolonged suffering does to the human soul. It trains the heart to expect darkness. It teaches fear how to settle inside your thinking. And eventually, it becomes difficult to remember what peace even felt like before all this began. But even there, even in the deepest part of his suffering, something strange remained alive inside him. Very small. Very quiet. Almost hidden beneath all the fear and exhaustion. But alive. A fragile little part of him that still reached toward God even when everything hurt. A weak little voice that still whispered. Maybe this is not the end. He did not understand why that hope remained. He could not explain it. Because logically, he felt exhausted beyond words. Emotionally, he felt close to breaking. Spiritually, he felt lost inside silence. And yet, something inside him refused to completely give up. Even after all the disappointment. Even after all the waiting. Even after all the fear. That small part remained. And maybe, that was because God was still there too. Quietly. Faithfully. Holding him together in ways he could not yet see. Because sometimes God allows a person to walk through deep suffering not to destroy them, but to bring them to the end of their own strength so they can finally discover something greater than control, greater than certainty, greater than temporary comfort. A faith that survives silence. A trust that survives fear. A peace that survives suffering. And though he could not understand it yet, heaven was already preparing victory in the exact place where he believed everything was ending. God. I do not even know where to begin anymore. My heart feels heavy in ways I cannot fully explain. I have tried to stay strong for so long. Tried to keep believing. Tried to keep moving forward even while something inside me slowly became more tired every day. And tonight, I am no longer pretending that I have everything under control. Because I don't. I feel exhausted. Not only physically. Deep inside. Soul tired. The kind of tiredness that follows me into every room and waits for me every morning before the day even begins. The kind that sits quietly in my chest and makes even simple moments feel emotionally heavy. And God. I do not know how much longer I can keep carrying all of this by myself. There are nights where the silence scares me. Nights where my thoughts become louder than peace. Nights where fear whispers things into my mind that I do not want to believe, but sometimes, after enough pain, those fears begin sounding real. What if nothing changes? What if this season never ends? What if I am fighting battles I cannot survive? Again. And again. And again. Those thoughts follow me everywhere, God. I try to pray over them. I try to silence them. I try to stay hopeful. But some days, hope itself feels heavy now. Some days I feel so emotionally exhausted that even getting through one more day feels difficult. And honestly, that frightens me. Because there was a time when trusting you felt easier. There was a time when peace came naturally. There was a time when I could pray without this constant heaviness inside me. But now everything feels uncertain. And uncertainty has slowly worn my heart down in ways I never expected. So tonight, I come to you honestly. Not with perfect faith. Not with strong confidence. Just honestly. I am tired, God. Tired of carrying fear about the future. Tired of trying to hold everything together. Tired of pretending I am stronger than I really am. Tired of silence. Tired of waiting. Tired of fighting thoughts that never seem to fully leave me alone. And I need you now more than ever. Because somewhere beneath all this exhaustion, beneath all this fear, there is still a small part of me reaching toward you. Even after all the disappointment. Even after all the waiting. Even after all the nights where I wondered if you had gone silent toward me. Something inside me still wants to believe you are here. So please, if you are close tonight, let me feel it somehow. Not through something dramatic. Not through immediate answers. Just through peace. Even small peace. Enough peace to help my heart breathe again. Enough peace to remind me I have not been abandoned. Because there are moments where I feel completely alone in this battle. Moments where nobody fully understands what is happening inside me. People see me functioning. Smiling. Continuing forward. But they do not see how much pressure I carry internally. They do not see the fear I fight quietly every day just to keep going. But you see it. You see every hidden tear. Every sleepless night. Every moment where I almost gave up emotionally but somehow kept going anyway. And God, if I am still standing after all of this, maybe that means you are still holding on to me even when I cannot hold on to myself. Please do not let go now. Stay with me in this silence. Stay with me in this uncertainty. Stay with me when fear becomes louder than faith. And when I no longer have strength to trust, carry me gently through this season until my heart can breathe again. God, teach me how to rest in you. Not only when life feels easy. Not only when prayers are answered quickly. But here. In the waiting. In the confusion. In the middle of everything I do not understand. Because maybe that is where real trust begins. Not in certainty. But in surrender. And surrender terrifies me sometimes. Letting go of control feels terrifying. Because part of me still believes I must carry everything alone or everything will fall apart. But maybe that fear has been exhausting me more than protecting me. Maybe I was never meant to carry the future by myself. Maybe I was never meant to survive this season through my own strength alone. So tonight, I place it in your hands. The fear. The pressure. The unanswered questions. The exhaustion. The silent sadness I do not know how to explain to anyone else. I place it all before you. And even though I still feel weak, I ask you to stay close enough that I never forget this truth. You are still here. Even in silence. Even in waiting. Even in suffering. You are still here. And maybe, what feels like the end of my story right now is only the painful middle before the victory you have been preparing all along. So help me hold on a little longer. Help me trust you a little deeper. Help me breathe through this darkness without losing hope completely. And when fear rises again tomorrow, remind my heart gently that no season lasts forever, no silence is wasted, and no pain is bigger than your ability to redeem it. Because right now, that is what I need most. Not certainty. Not control. Just the quiet assurance that I am not walking through this alone. And somehow, even now, even through all the fear and exhaustion, I still believe you are beside me. And then, slowly, quietly, almost without him realizing it at first, something inside him began to change. Not his circumstances immediately. Not the problems he had spent so many nights praying about. Not the uncertainty surrounding his future. The first thing God changed was something much deeper than all of that. His heart. It happened during one of those nights where he felt emotionally exhausted beyond words. A night where he no longer had strength left to pretend he understood what God was doing. A night where he sat alone in silence, too tired to force hopeful thoughts, too tired to keep fighting fear, too tired to even explain his pain anymore. And for the first time in a very long while, he stopped trying to control everything. He simply sat there. Quiet. Still. Breathing slowly in the middle of all the heaviness. And in that silence, something happened. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But undeniably. Peace entered the room. Not complete peace. Not the kind that removed every problem instantly. A quieter kind. A deeper kind. The kind that reaches a person even before circumstances change. And suddenly, he realized something that changed the way he saw everything. God had not abandoned him during the silence. Not once. Not during the waiting. Not during the nights of fear. Not during the moments he thought he was emotionally collapsing. God had been there the entire time, quietly holding him together while he thought he was falling apart. That realization broke something open inside him. Tears came slowly at first, then all at once, because for the first time in so long, he understood how exhausted he had become from trying to survive life through his own strength. He had spent months trying to carry fear, uncertainty, pressure, disappointment, and emotional pain completely alone. Trying to control every outcome. Trying to protect himself from every possible future. Trying to hold himself together while secretly breaking inside. And now, sitting in God's presence without answers, he finally understood something deeper than answers. He was never meant to carry all of this alone. That truth changed everything. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But deeply. Because suddenly the silence no longer felt empty. It felt holy. The waiting no longer felt meaningless. It felt purposeful. Even the suffering itself began looking different through his eyes. At first he thought this season was destroying him. But now, he slowly began realizing that God had been rebuilding him in places comfort never could reach. Every delay had exposed how dependent he had become on control. Every unanswered prayer had revealed fears hidden deep inside his heart. Every painful season had slowly stripped away the illusion that peace could only exist when life felt safe. And once he saw that, transformation truly began. The fear that once controlled his mind started losing its power little by little. Not because every problem disappeared overnight, but because now he understood something stronger than fear. God was already present in the future he was afraid of. That truth steadied him, calmed him, strengthened him in ways he could not explain. He stopped waking up every morning trying desperately to control every outcome. He stopped exhausting himself searching for certainty before taking another step forward. He stopped believing silence meant abandonment. Instead, he started learning how to rest emotionally even in uncertainty. That was new for him. Very new. Because for so long, peace had depended on circumstances. If life felt stable, he felt calm. If doors opened, he felt hopeful. If prayers were answered quickly, trust came naturally. But now he was discovering a deeper kind of peace. The kind rooted in God Himself. Not in visible outcomes. Not in immediate breakthrough. Not in control. And once that peace began growing inside him, everything slowly changed. He became calmer during uncertainty. Softer during pressure. More patient in waiting seasons. He stopped panicking every time life became unstable because he now understood that God often does His deepest work in hidden seasons where nothing seems to make sense at first. And slowly, the version of himself shaped by fear began disappearing. The anxious version. The exhausted version. The version that believed suffering meant defeat. All of it was changing. Because now he saw something he could never unsee again. What felt like the end of his story had actually been the middle before victory. The darkness was not punishment. The silence was not rejection. The waiting was not abandonment. God had been preparing him the entire time. Preparing his heart. Preparing his faith. Preparing his spirit to become stronger than circumstances. And the more he understood that, the more peace replaced fear. He began noticing small miracles everywhere. Quiet miracles. The kind most people overlook. Strength appearing on days he thought he would emotionally collapse. Peace arriving in moments where fear once controlled him completely. Unexpected doors slowly beginning to open after long seasons of silence. Conversations arriving at exactly the right time. Tiny reminders that heaven had never stopped moving even when life appeared still. And eventually, he realized something powerful. Victory does not always begin when circumstances change. Sometimes victory begins the moment fear loses authority over your heart. Sometimes victory begins when a person finally learns how to trust God in uncertainty instead of only during comfort. Sometimes victory begins quietly, deep inside the soul, long before the outside world notices anything different. And that was exactly what God had done in him. He was no longer the same person who entered that dark season. Suffering had changed him. Waiting had deepened him. Silence had strengthened him. Not into someone harder. Into someone wiser. Stronger. More compassionate. More dependent on God than control. And standing there looking back at everything he survived, he finally understood why God never rushed the process. Because if God had removed every struggle immediately, he never would have discovered this deeper faith. If God had answered every prayer instantly, he never would have learned how to trust without visible proof. If life had stayed comfortable, he never would have discovered how strong God truly is in human weakness. And suddenly, even the painful parts of the story carried meaning now. Nothing had been wasted. Not the tears. Not the waiting. Not the sleepless nights. Not the fear. God had used every part of it to rebuild him from the inside out. And now, even if difficult seasons came again someday, he would never face them the same way. Because once a person discovers that God remains faithful in silence, fear never fully controls them again. Once a person survives the darkest middle of their story and realizes heaven never abandoned them there, they stop viewing suffering as the end. They begin seeing it differently. Not as destruction. As preparation. Preparation for deeper faith. Preparation for stronger peace. Preparation for the victory God was quietly building long before they could recognize it. And standing there at the end of that painful season, one truth became clearer than anything else. What he thought would break him, became the very thing God used to transform him completely.